Hey, welcome to Neppy Invest. A bit of a surprise this morning when I was trolling through the ASX announcements. I came across SciDev's release of their half-yearly report a little bit earlier than I really would have expected, but I think management were quite excited to get this to market because they did record their maiden profit. Now, if you do know a little bit about SciDev, you might be wanting to argue with me right now because if you go back to 2018, they did have a profitable year that year, but I consider that to be a false profit or just a one-off. Now, in 2018, they did record $2 million in revenue and had $1 million in profit. And the whole reason they were profitable that year was because they did dispose of an asset. And on disposal of that asset, they did have a gain of $2 million. So it was a one-off, and I don't really consider that a real profit because it wasn't in operations. They were also profitable in about 2011, but that was a different iteration of this company. That was actually before they actually took an interest in SciDev, and the previous iteration of SciDev wasn't actually called SciDev, it was called something else, and then that company bought SciDev back 5 or 6 years ago, I forget exactly when. But anyway, a maiden profit this morning. Very exciting news, especially for long-term shareholders like myself. So before I get to the financials of SciDev's half year, just going to talk about, for a brief little amount of time, about what the company does. So this company is all about solids liquid separation. I think most people probably haven't really thought about that, but it's becoming an increasingly important issue around the world, not only for companies, but I think for society at large, because water is a scarce resource, and I think it's becoming an increasingly scarce resource as we go through the next few decades. Now, SciDev is targeting 4 key verticals, and the first two there, mining and mineral processing and oil and gas, are the largest revenue generators right now, with about $14 million in annualized revenue. And they do have some impressive clients within those two areas. For instance, Exxon, Shell, Glencore, BHP, Yancoal, Iluka, that sort of thing. And they're starting to increase their business, and it looks pretty promising moving forward. Now, it's pretty impressive to see how much water these companies need for their everyday operations. So for instance, in the oil and gas sector, for every barrel of oil, there are 5 barrels of water produced. So you can just see how important it is for a business to understand how to reuse, recycle water is in their everyday operations, because if they can increasingly better use the water that is produced or is needed, they can reduce their costs, increase their profit base, and that will make everyone happy. The shareholders, the business, and even the environmentalists much more happy. Infrastructure and construction, not quite as large as the other two at this moment, but still $6 million in annualized revenue, and the main customers there are Melbourne Metro Tunnel and Sydney Tunnel. And water and wastewater, the smallest of the 4 areas, only $2 million in annualized revenue. But I do think that has a lot of promise moving forward, because SciDev has introduced solutions specifically designed for treatment of wastewater and biological sludges. So I think you're going to see governments around the world become more and more interested in what SciDev is doing, hopefully. So I've taken this slide straight from the presentation that is included alongside their financial results. And I really like this because this makes you understand how they win business and just the time frame and the process behind it. So you're seeing from where they target a project and to where they get a commercial contract could take between 12 and 18 months. You could also see where some of their clients are within this business cycle. You can see Shell, Melbourne Metro and Iluka and Yancoal are right at the commercial contract, while BHP and Oz Minerals are in the field validation area. So even in that field validation area, they do receive some revenue, but the ongoing revenue is when they get the commercial contract. So I'd really highly recommend going through their presentation. Now let's look at the revenue before the financial performance of SciDev for the half year. So first of all, look at the revenue and profit, and then the next slide I'll look at gross margin and cash receipts. So revenue and profit have increased by significant amounts. We're looking at 200% increase for revenue from 8 million to 18.3 million, and profits increased 324% from a low base, but it's now profitable to the tune of $427,000. Now let's talk about cash receipts and gross margin. Now I tend to focus more on the cash receipts than say the revenue, especially for small companies. But SciDev is getting to the point where revenue and cash receipts, they sort of go hand in hand. But you can see cash receipts is lagging revenue, but that's ordinary enough. That's typically see that because there is a bit of a lag between the time you receive the money from a contract from when you sort of first recognize the revenue. So a bit of a lag there, but it's still up 316%. And the main thing here is I really focus on gross margins and how that's increasing. So gross margins are only at 23%, but that's increased 29% from the previous corresponding period. And they do suggest that moving forward, the gross margins should be between 20 and 30% for this business. So if you compare it to a software company which has gross margins of say 80, 90%, it's nowhere like that, but you wouldn't expect that. So it's very important to look at gross margins in context when you're looking at a business. So now focusing on the segment performance, so I really like to look at this just to see how each segment of the company is doing. And you can see mining and mineral processing and oil and gas are the largest revenue generators for the company. Mining and mineral processing just ahead of oil and gas at 7.2 compared to 6.9. But the other two are starting to increase their revenue as well. So all four are going to be highly important for SciDev moving forward over the next 5 to 10 years. So the last thing I always like to look at is the chart. So when I look at the daily chart, I just see noise here. And because I'm a long-term holder of SciDev and hopefully will be a long-term holder for the next decade or so, I tend to just ignore the daily chart, which you can see here, a lot of noise, lots of ups and downs, and mainly focus on the weekly chart, which I have here. You can see the company did reach about an inflection point in July 2019 at around 10 cents or just above 10 cents. Would have been the ideal time to buy in, and then it just kept on rising from then all the way to the COVID-19 financial panic, where the share price fell from 90 cents all the way down to 30 cents. But you can see with the moving averages here, hit the blue moving average, which is a 100-week moving average, and then it bounced off that. And you can see moving forward, whenever the share price gets towards the 50-week moving average, it always bounces off. It's done it 3 times at the moment. So that's always a good time to buy, and a good time to sell is, if you are like a short-term trader, would be when it gets a little bit above the 20-week moving average. But at this point in time, I'm in it for the long term for SciDev, and there's no reason to sell because I do believe if you look at the price for SciDev in about 10 years' time, it's going to be significantly higher than the current share price. So that's all I've got on the maiden profit for SciDev. Again, technically, it's not really the maiden profit because they did have a profit in 2018 and back in 2011, but I think this is their first real maiden profit. So I hope you've got something out of this video. We're only doing these videos for educational, entertainment, and research purposes to give you some ideas. So if you do like what I presented in this video, maybe you can do some follow-up research and find out more about SciDev. I'm not a financial advisor, so if you do need to seek financial advice from a professional, make sure you seek it from someone who is qualified, not me. So that's all for this video. Have a good day. Bye.